So tables are also a very common element that you will see in HTML. So I'm going to add some tables right here after our ordered list, right above the image. So we can do it like this. We have our opening table tag, and then you need a closing table tag. So anytime you want to put a table on the page, just some sort of a nicely formatted grid of text or numbers or whatever, you can use these table tags. Now this is how they work. You want to have a row, so TR for table row, and then the closing one right here. Usually you want to do these all on separate lines like this. And then if we want to populate this row, we can do a TD for some data in here in this table, like that. And what we can say is something like name. We'll just put a name in here like John Doe. Okay, so if I save this now and I go over here and I refresh, it's just going to look like plain text in here. And as we build this table out, you'll start to see it'll take more of a tabular format. Okay, so if I go over here and I add right next to this, if I copy this and just put it on another line, we nest another piece of table data in here, and we'll just put a different name this time, like Jane Smith. And if I save that, when I go back over here and I refresh, there, now you can see the text is lined up in this kind of table format. Now, if I want to add another row, I can do the same thing. I can just copy all of this right here, and we'll just add it right above like this. Okay? And if I save this now and I go over here and I refresh, there, you're starting to see that table format form. Okay, now, what if I wanted to make the first row kind of the title, and then every row after that are more like table cells, right? Like the table data goes inside of the bottom rows, but that very first row is our title. Well, there's a special tag for that. Instead of using the TD tag in your opening row there, this is our opening row, instead of that, we can use the TH, okay, the table heading tag right there. So we want to change these right here to table heading, so TH. And if I save this now and I go over here and I refresh, you'll see they're bold by default in our HTML. Now remember, we can use CSS to style this table, but there you go, the first row now, since we specified TH for the first row, we have these headings for our table. Okay, so if we go over here now and let's just make this table make a little more sense, we can change this to say something like name, and we could change this to say something like phone number, let's say. Phone number. If I save this, and I go over here and I refresh, there we go. We've got our table with the name and the phone number. And if you notice now, it's been centered by default over each column right here. Now, let's go over here and let's make this table make a little more sense. So we can change this to be a phone number. So we'll just do 555, 555, 5555, just a fake phone number in there. If I save that, and we refresh, there we go. We've got a phone number and a name in that, in their proper columns there. And if we just wanted to keep adding more rows, we can do that. Just copy this table row right here and add yet another one below like that. And let's just make this one Jane Smith right here. Okay, and we'll change her number to something else. So if I save all that, we go over here and we refresh, there we go. We're starting to get that table taking shape. So you can add as many rows as you want, but you want to usually have a matching number of columns for each row. Notice we have 2 columns in each of these rows, right? So that's why we have 2 sets of elements inside of each row. We've got our 2 headers, right here, our 2 headings, and then we've got our 2 pieces of data inside of each row. So if you're going to add another heading in here, like TH, and we'll just say email address. We want our closing tags right there. Then typically you're going to want to populate that stuff out with additional email addresses. So we can add additional pieces of data inside of each row. Like that. Okay. We'll change this one to look a little bit different. So if I save all of that and we go over here and we refresh, there you go. Now we're seeing that table take shape. Okay, so this is how you create tables in your HTML. There's a lot of different tags working together for this, but they're pretty easy to memorize as you get used to them because they're all kind of starting with the letter T, right? right here. It's just table row, table heading, and then you've got your table cells here with the TD tag, okay, for data. Now, one thing I want to show you here is that if I pull this apart and kind of stretch this out a little more and I right click and I say inspect using Google Chrome, we get our inspector tool. Now, I'm not expecting you to be totally familiar with this tool yet, but I'm going to show you this. If I hover over any of the elements here in the browser's interpretation of this HTML, okay, we can add some CSS styles. And you haven't learned all your CSS yet, but we can go over here and we can do something like this and say border. And then on the other side of the colon, we could say something like 1 pixel solid black. And there we go. Now this entire table has a border around it like that. Okay, so whenever you hover over some element over here on the left, you get this element.style thing over here on the right. This is where you can add CSS for that particular element. And as you can see, what the browser has done is added it inline. It injected it inline. And this is just a temporary state. Once I refresh the page, all of these inspector changes in here will go away. So it's just a playground, if you will, to kind of make some changes and see what they'll look like. So if I go over here and we choose something like the TH tags, we could go over here and add some CSS to that particular element. So border, 1 pixel solid red. And there we go. Now we have a red border. So I'm just showing you this just to give you a taste of how this inspector works. But more importantly, I just wanted to show you this so that you could start to visualize very clearly how these tables occupy this space like this and create this tabular format. Okay, so that's just a fun little trick we can do. I'm going to X out of this inspector here. As an interesting note, in the early days, a lot of web pages were built using these tables, okay? Because you can get this layout start to take shape, right? If I go to something like the Facebook homepage, you start to see layouts. Layouts are very common all over the web. You have a form on the right, and you've got some call to actions and some images or icons on the left. You've got a logo up here on the top left. You've got a login form on the right, right? So a lot of times with web pages, you want to create layouts. This is what we mean by layouts. We're kind of creating a visually appealing page where we're laying out or placing all of the different elements in different locations on our page, right? It just helps the user follow their eyes and kind of navigate through the page easily, right? So these layouts used to be achieved using tables like this, because as you can see, you can start to get a layout and you can empty out some of the cells or fill them out with forms or nest other HTML elements inside of them. But this is not how we build web pages anymore today. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this and you'll see these inspector changes are gone. Nowadays, we use the div tag to create layouts, and we use CSS to achieve the spacing and kind of measure out how many pixels of the page we want to occupy. Okay, so we're going to learn more about the div tag down the line, but now you know a little bit about the history of these tables. Now, one last thing I want to mention here is if we go over to W3 Schools, right? So if we search for HTML tables in Google, usually you'll see the W3 Schools website in the first few results. If you click on that, you can learn more about tables. There's some really interesting things you can do when you need to lay things out in table format. And specifically what I wanted to point out to you is that they have these column span attributes that you can add. So you can control how many kind of spaces or how many characters a column or a row should kind of span out. So same thing with the row span. Okay, so keep in mind, go ahead and take a look at this. And the cool thing about this W3 Schools website is that you can also do these try it yourself boxes right here. Okay, so there's a ton of these all throughout the website. As you can see here on the left, you can read all about the different types of HTML elements there are here. But if you look here, these try it yourself buttons, if you click on them, when you're on any particular HTML element, you'll see that you have this playground where you can kind of make changes over here, and then you click this run button, and you'll see the result instantly on the right. So this is a nice way to really play around with the different things. So you can study and see what different column spans do when you play around with it over here, okay? So try messing around with this and definitely come to this site to get a feel for not only tables, but as you can see here on the left, all of these other things you can learn about with HTML. And I will warn you, it is easy to kind of get overwhelmed. I don't recommend that you use this site and try to just